Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Season 1, Episode 2 of Only Murders in the Building. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. I do like that, obviously, this is like a very Mabel-centric episode, too, just because, obviously, we found out last episode that Tim, the victim, is one of her Hardy Boys, and actually this episode kind of deep dives on her situation with the Hardy Boys. Her and Tim have actually known each other for a very long time since they were actually kids, because she'd come stay with her aunt like during winter break and like summer break, so every once in a while her and Tim would hang out like that. They spent so much time the Hardy Boy adventures. She had talked about it last episode with Charles about, they make their own mysteries and stuff, and then eventually they met Oscar and Zoe. We saw them older when they met each other, so I am curious, did they not meet? Because she did say for a long time it was just her and Tim, but it seems like Zoe might have been the bad influence of the group, because it seemed like she was a little kleptomaniac. She would kind of, because Oscar's the supervisor, as a kid or something, so he had keys. He made copies of keys to all the apartments and stuff. So, or to probably because I'm sure this, anyway, and ended up they just kind of broke into different places for their mysteries and stuff. Sure, but he also thought was kind of interesting because I noticed the whale tattoo or something, and I was like, is that something Selena Gomez has, or is that just for the character? It seems like it's for the character because Zoe has the same tattoo, and it's because it's a Hardy Boys book is related to a whale tattoo, so that's what that was about. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I feel bad for Mabel. I mean, to be fair, everyone's talking mad shit about Tim because there was a gathering of all right, we'll find out, the killer revealed themselves or whatever, because they're trying to find out who had motive to go after Tim. Apparently everyone did. Everyone in the building hated Tim because he was kind of a dick. And I think that almost kind of plays interestingly enough with Mabel's character, because Mabel's got this dry, sarcastic approach. And I guess it kind of worked well with Tim's dry sarcasticness. He was kind of a dick to most people, but for her it's he was blunt, but he never lied, and that's what she really appreciated, because Mabel doesn't like it. I mean, I think generally most people don't, but she takes offense to liars. I think especially when she finds out Charles lied. And I think this kind of ties in with the whole Zoe thing. Zoe ended up getting murdered, and Oscar took the fall for it, but Tim saw her fighting with someone else, but he never cleared Oscar's name. Why not? So it had to be someone that they knew that he was trying to protect. Not unless it was himself. Because Mabel's been sitting here this entire time trying to figure out, what happened, why he would lie. Because the thing is that, because I think at one point we saw in the flashbacks, Mabel had confronted him at some point in time. It's Oscar's getting out of prison, I think. You always knew who the truth, but he's I don't want to think about what happened back then. That's why I'm at the very least, it might lend itself to make you believe that he's the one who did it. Or, like I said, maybe he's protecting the person who actually did it for whatever reason. But circling to the point, Mabel was so upset with Charles when she found out Charles is, everything he said last episode about his dad and everything, and why he's kind of alone, is something straight from the show Brazos. Which, to be fair, in retrospect, it's it did seem a little monologue-ish, didn't it? And it's well, now we find out straight out of the show, and Mabel doesn't like that, because it's because I think more so than anything, it's the person that never lied, that ended up lied at the most crucial time. The one time Tim lied was at such a crucial point, and it was our friend is in trouble because of it. 2, it's also because she opened up to him. Mabel probably doesn't open up to a lot of people, so when Charles told that story, it made her talk about her Hardy Boys, because she probably doesn't talk about them at all with anyone. So she was vulnerable with him, and it's he was quote unquote vulnerable with her, so that's why I think she took extra offense to it. It's so, but like I said, going back to it really quickly. No one liked him. It's like, oh, no one can have a fireplace on because of him. And even Charles being like, wait, he was a fireplace guy? I hate this guy. You know? And they're trying to, like, I love the whole thing with, which is so messed up on his part, but I love that Oliver was like, oh yeah, let me record you, like, oh, you're heartbroken at this little gathering about Tim, and it's like, and the moment he was bringing up Evelyn, his cat, I was like, oh, I guess he's like, we need you to enunciate more because we can't hear you, and as I do it again, it's like, my cat Evelyn died last night, and they're like, oh, that's what you're crying about? And then someone else is like, wait, what's wrong? It's like, Howard, it's like, Evelyn died. What? And then everyone else is heartbroken about it, and it's like, wow. I was like, that's super fucked up. No one cares about Tim, but everyone's heartbroken about the cat. I mean, I get it, but it's like, Tim is that unlikable. That's so interesting. And I even love the therapist, which is super jacked up. He's like, hey, I know we're all broken up about Tim's death, but if you need to talk to me, I am a therapist. I live in this particular room, and I have Venmo. And he's like, I know we're all broken up about Evelyn's death, but if you need someone to talk, once again, therapist, Venmo. It's like, that's all kinds of, I mean, I guess you got to get business where you can get it, so it's just still kind of jacked up to pick this particular time to try and be that. They ended up, eventually breaking into Tim's apartment, and they ended up, well, for one, they didn't notice this because they were so busy focusing on everything else, but Mabel immediately goes over to the shelf of Hardy Boys. Maybe if, like, they had paid more attention, they would have been like, oh, this guy's in the Hardy Boys. It's like, oh, and then they still haven't made that connect yet. I mean, why would you jump to that conclusion? It's easier to see it now because we know the truth about Mabel and him. I'd wondered about that, and I'd asked this last episode, I was like, oh, like, did they make a thing of like, yeah, let's just ignore each other? It's like, yeah, they made that a point to not be around each other. And now looking back on things in retrospect, like, it's like, right, when she was the first one, when they went and saw Tim's dead body, they kind of really focused on her expression the most. It's like, yeah, they were leaving you tips the entire time, while she was like, oh, no, he wouldn't do that. So it even more layered into the story, that obviously she had a personal connection to Tim, and it's just an interesting thing when she kind of, even rewatching bits of it, kind of being like, oh, like, the signs were always there. Probably just didn't have all the clues to piece it together necessarily, like any good mystery. But Mabel really took offense the way Charles and Oliver were talking about him, and it's just like, yeah, Tim was a person, because the whole podcast, episode 2, even though it's like episode 1 isn't even done yet, it's about who is Tim Kono, but it's like, who was Tim Kono, but Oliver's like, I already kind of picked the episode title. It's like, you haven't even started, it's not set in stone, and an episode title can always change later. You can always do that in editing and stuff like that. But, I think it's interesting because I think Oliver, obviously, I think there's a lot you could pull from that he's trying to take such control of this situation because he's kind of losing a little bit of control in the rest of his life, too. Obviously, Bunny comes to him about, like, right, your building fees, you're, like, 8 months behind. He's like, oh, we're friends. She's like, well, that's why I'm telling you this with a friendly tone. Don't fuck with me, Oliver. He was like, oh, I wouldn't want that. No, and she's like, I wouldn't want that either. Like, neither one of us would really like that, or something like that. Was kind of the back and forth between them. I was like, oh, I was wondering whether Charles and Mabel heard that, but they didn't. That whole exchange, knowing, because when they were in Tim's room, it's like, oh, like, he's far behind on, like, bills and rent and stuff like that, and it's like, oh, and Charles like, oh, God, like, the fact is that he's behind on building fees. The more behind he is, the more we have to pay. And then Oliver's just like, what, he's not a terrible human being just because he's, like, a little, like, slow to write a check. And it's like, yeah, everyone's little secrets are bubbling to the surface. But obviously, Charles and Oliver would be a lot more sensitive, because it is a very insensitive way they're handling this whole thing, because it's like, right, you're talking all this shit about Tim and you've literally got his blood on the bottom of your shoes. But it's like, they would be a lot more sensitive if they knew Mabel's connection, but it's like, she refuses to say it, because I think, once again, it's like, it's not the easiest thing for her to open up to about, plus it's her thing, like, solving mysteries was like her and the Hardy Boys. So for her, it's like, she's kind of taking this on herself. It's like, yeah, she's working with them, but it's like, it's not the same thing. It's not like, because maybe that's also too, because she kind of connected with Charles the same way she connected with Tim, especially because the way Oliver puts it, no one in the building likes Charles either. To the point Ursula, who works kind of in the basement and stuff, and he's like, wait, her name's not Aurora? It's like, wait, so you... He's like... And he was just like, you stay here because people might like you just as least as they like... You're probably as less liked as Tim is. So he's the one that went to go talk to Ursula, which just shows you who Oliver is. That he is very charming. A lot of people like him. But the moment Charles showed up, she's like, oh, it's you. Because apparently he doesn't tip, but he gives people autographed photos. I'm like, what was it he was saying? He was saying that... I forgot the exact word he was using. He was like, oh, tipping is something. And then he talked about giving me photos. I'm like... Isn't that more... I think it was like... What he's saying, like, entitled, I think is what he was saying. It wasn't entitled. There was some specific word he used, and I was like, you handing out autographed pictures of yourself is worse. It's like, that's super cringe. Why would you... Ugh. It's like, that's that star element. It's like, oh, you're so full of yourself. Which... It's so interesting because I'm sure like that's kind of an element for both Charles and Oliver that they're both overcompensating because he constantly brings up, oh, I'm a director. He has to because he hasn't worked recently, so he has to kind of focus on that. And I'm sure Charles is in the same way where like Brazos is probably the biggest thing he's kind of really known for, so he kind of leans into that because he's like, oh, like he'll constantly be like, oh, that's a line from the show, that's a line from the show, but he didn't say that about the story. And then, you know, eventually Mabel confronts him. He was like, well, that was the one thing in the show they let me write. So he probably did bring in his real life into the show. And she was almost like, oh. And he's like, and you said it verbatim? And he was like, did I? Maybe. He's like, is that kind of messed up? Because I think it's interesting because Oliver's like, right, you trust me, you'll know when he's acting. And so it's like, right, let's have a little trust thing between us. We got to trust each other. And Mabel's kind of like, fuck off, I'm not behind all that. It's like, cool, let's not lie to each other anymore. But then the moment she leaves, Oliver's like, I don't trust that girl. Like, she's shifty. I'm like, oh, that's so messed up. It's like, oh yeah, let's trust each other. I don't trust her, you know? And I think Charles is kind of getting the vibe, like, yeah, there is something she's not telling them. It is kind of messed up. It's like, right, you're mad at him for lying, but once again, it's like you're hiding stuff too, but you were open because he was vulnerable, so it is a little bit of a conundrum in that regard. But that was also probably one of my thought was like maybe that's why Mabel probably connects a little bit more with Charles because he probably does remind her of Tim. It's like, right, no one in the building liked Tim, no one really likes Charles either, so I still feel like Tim's probably more hated, but still. And I thought it was such an interesting thing that Mabel started recording those, like, oh, who is Tim? She's like, I'm going to find out. Because they hadn't been around each other so long. I think after the whole thing with Zoe, they really, like... Because I think they were saying, like, right, it's been 10 years, and, you know, now Oscar's getting out. I think it's, like, for 10 years, they kind of lived in this building, but, I mean... Well, she probably still visited from time to time because she was originally living in Long Island, so she's probably only recently back. So that confrontation with Tim probably was like after 10 years. Like she probably did not come around, probably didn't stay with her aunt for like summers and winters after the whole Zoe thing maybe. So this is probably her first time back in so long. So maybe she was using it as an excuse to see Tim because of the whole Oscar situation, so... Because also, Charles hasn't brought up the key information of he saw someone going upstairs when everyone was leaving when the fire alarm went off last episode. He saw someone in like a white hoodie keeping their head covered and down. So you would go like, well, maybe it had something to do with, you know, maybe it's Oscar getting Tim back for not having his back when the time came, knowing the truth and still lying about it. Because Mabel went back to his apartment and found all those, the Hardy Boy books. But, like, because she kept holding on to the engagement ring the entire time. Because it's like, right, nothing said that he had a girlfriend. And now they find out, well, she finds out that he has a whole bunch of jewelry. So it's like, oh, they were hidden in a book. So I wonder, was Tim working with someone, stealing stuff from people in the apartment little by little and no one noticed. And one of the books, he kept the drawings he had gotten from Mabel years ago when they were younger, like the picture of like the beach she drew from where she lived in Long Beach. So, but Mabel was dedicating herself to find out the truth. She wants to know who because through this mystery she can find out who Tim is, and once again she's wondering if she's next, because it's like, right, because now two of the Hardy boys are dead. It's Zoe, now Tim. So the only ones left are her and Oscar. So who knows if Oscar's like out of jail yet, or whether because I think she said he's about to get out. So I don't know if he is out yet. So we'll have to wait and see. But she's leaving that just in case something happens to her. So we'll ultimately have to wait and see how all of that ends up playing out. Very excited to ultimately see where the next episode ends up taking us going forward with all of this. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.